Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok. My partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
I'm doing pretty well, Yariv. Can't complain. Halfway through the week here. Obviously, for the Flyers, it's a little bit of a different situation. Some expectations of them potentially improving to start the season, and it's been a little bit of an opposite of an improvement, really. They've taken a bit of a step back in a sense, and they do find themselves as the last place team in the NHL standings right now, with 9 points in 13 games. So
Yeah.
I'm doing good. You're doing good. Flyers not so hot, but what's up, buddy?
Yeah, we wanted hockey and we got it.
Yeah. Not a great brand of hockey, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
It's definitely not the hockey we asked for. Maybe the one we deserve, though. Yeah. Well, we got a lot to talk about still. And I'm sure a lot of people probably have their venting, which is warranted at this point, whether even I agree with your venting or not. It would be definitely understandable with what we've experienced so far in the early portion of the season. But before we get started, let's do the whole spiel that I usually do to kick off the podcast. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the video. If you like the content that we're making, please like the video, hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified on when we release our videos on YouTube. The audio version is available on Spotify and iTunes, and you can go there and find our episodes as well. Should be out at the exact same time, unless I screw up, which I do quite a bit. And make sure to give us a follow there and a rating as well. Again, those are the best ways to support our podcast, and likes and subscriptions. If you're listening and you haven't done that so far, please do so. It would be most appreciated. And also, shout out to our sponsors. First sponsor, Jim Steaks, 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. You're sad about the Flyers losing. Saddy, eat a cheesesteak. It'll give you a temporary moment of joy to take away the pain. But in all seriousness, Jim's got great steaks, so make sure to go check out Jim's Steaks at 4th and South. Also, a shout out to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Make sure to go to Summit Public Adjusters for all of your insurance facilitation needs. They will help you work with your insurance company, take care of your paperwork. All the annoying parts of insurance hassles that everybody wants to avoid. Summit Public Adjusters will be there for you and help ease that process along. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also just want to give a brief shout out to our partner, Sports Spider. SportsSpider.com has you... I read this all wrong. Sports Spider, guys, if you're tired of searching for multiple websites, for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. Hit the link in the description. It's available below in the description. Don't miss out. Again, they're an aggregator. They are our partners. Make sure to check them out. Okay, let's get into it, dude. So we had a lot of stuff to talk about with the team. We'll start with a little bit of news. We'll try to, and I guess the majority of the segment is just kind of talking about what is wrong with the Flyers. We'll go pretty in depth in that. Just kind of go through opinions on that. We'll talk about the defensive pairings. We'll talk about Kolosov. We'll talk about the offense, the lack thereof offense. And what we think could be the issues there behind that. Again, we've kind of referenced it before, but we're going to go deeper into it today. And then we'll do a quick update on the Flyers prospects at the end, as we usually end. So again, we're kind of shooting off the hip a little bit more on this one, but not as topic specific. But let's be honest, we just want to talk about what the elephant in the room is and what's wrong with this team. So before we get to that point, a minor trade has happened this week. You probably have already heard about it. But Ronnie Attard has been officially traded to the Edmonton Oilers. Most likely just a pure AHL for AHL deal for defenseman Ben Gleason. Ben Gleason is the same age as Ronnie Attard at 26 years old. Attard is a 6'4" player. Ben Gleason is 6'1", so not small, but seems to be more mobile type of defenseman, more offensive over the past, let's just say 3 years. That's probably his breakout party. He's been a consistent 9 to 10 goal scorer. He's had anywhere between 44 to 32 points playing 70 or less games in the AHL. And this year, he already has 4 points in 7 games. So the reason I like this trade is one, Ronnie Attard probably met the end of the road here. Again, didn't really get a look. This was his last real opportunity with the Flyers. Otherwise, he would have walked in free agency. And while Ronnie Attard is an offensive defenseman, he's more of like a big shooter, big body type of guy. Never saw it at the NHL level, which I think is something that really hurt him, is that he wasn't aggressive enough offensively. But it seems to me, I guess on surface level, is that Ben Gleason might be more of a playmaking type offensive defenseman, maybe slightly more mobile. I don't have a good scouting report on him, but that's kind of my initial assumption, just looking at his numbers and his size. Hopefully we get a look at him, but I thought it was a smart trade for the Flyers considering Ronnie Attard was probably on his way out regardless, even though he was well liked. But the Flyers or the Phantoms could definitely use another offensive defenseman. Again, Emil Andre's with the Flyers at this point. If you really look at their D-core at the minor league level, maybe their most offensive defenseman right now is Ethan Sansom, and he's not really ready for that type of role, even though he is improving. But it's like Ethan Sansom and Louis Belpedio. So they kind of lack that back end puck mover. So I think it's a pretty smart move for the Phantoms. I thought it was a smart AHL deal that, again, they are playing tonight. And just going by Bob Rochuk's lines, he is not in the lineup tonight. I assume that he will probably get into next game. But I'm excited to see what he does for the Phantoms, especially considering he's a guy that will fill a need that they have. So what do you think about Ronnie Attard moving on and the return of Ben Gleason?
Yeah, I think for Attard getting traded, the writing is essentially on the wall in the sense, like you stated, right? We all knew that this was his make or break season in terms of getting that NHL opportunity, an extended opportunity at the NHL level. Obviously, he had a very poor training camp. And I think that's, in a sense, shifted over a bit to the beginning of his AHL season, right? Like to start the season so far in 7 games, Attard has 0 points and is a -3. So not the best of starts for him. And I think for Attard and just his game in general, it was always hyped that there would be more of an offensive kind of touch to him. I think when he first got called up after getting signed out of college and coming out of college, you did see more of that kind of offensive instincts in his game come to the forefront in his little like cups of coffee in the NHL. And then I do think the last couple of call-ups he's had, he hasn't really looked too offensive. So maybe that's has something to do with it. But in terms of Gleason, it's a pretty good pickup for an AHL only deal, right? He's a more of an offensive type defenseman, more of a puck mover. He's outscored Attard, with a 44 point season. He's had a 33 point season, 32 point season. So I do think for a Phantoms lineup where the defense is a little bit depleted just due to having, Emil Andre getting called up, adding another offensive weapon like a Gleason should be a help for them and hopefully their power play unit. But yeah, for an AHL only deal on a guy in Attard that likely wasn't going to be returning after this season, I think it's a smart move to potentially get a guy that you might be able to keep in your system and keep with the Phantoms going ahead.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, he might be good in a call-up. I mean, Louis Belpedio was really good. He came over, I think Belpedio was 26 when he came over, also 25. And while these guys aren't high-value NHL players, in a pinch, if they're veterans and they do have somewhat of a refined game, it does help. We look at the struggles that the Flyers, I don't want to say their D is struggling overall, but maybe somebody like Igor Zamula, who, you're not going to replace Zamula with Gleason really, but, if there are injury woes, it's nice to have a veteran down there that can play that type of role if they find themselves without it. Now, the Flyers are 8 deep right now at the NHL level with Andre and York on the way coming back. But I think it was still a good move. And you pointed out that Ronnie Attard has just had no offense. And the Phantoms need to win. They are doing pretty mediocre. They're not horrible, but again, they kind of sit in that same spot again. And with the next piece of news, or not the next one, we'll get to that one. Actually, you know what? I'll move it up and we'll talk about. So with losing Anthony Richard now in the short term, that's their leading goal scorer. They need to find offense, so maybe they can drive more offense from the back end. So yeah, let's get to that next piece of move, and I'll move number 2 down, Vasili.
Yeah, sure.
So the Flyers have recalled Anthony Richard. Richard did have a strong preseason. He's not very old. He's 27 years old, so he's in his prime. But he is a speedster with offensive talent. Elite Prospect has him listed as a speedster with puck handling skills. He was taken fourth overall, so this is not necessarily like a throwaway type of guy. And quite frankly, he's been the best player on the Phantoms this year with 9 points in 7 games, above a point per game pace, which is very good. 4 goals, 5 assists, a +3. So that preseason that he had is moving his way into the Phantoms regular season. He's actually outpacing what he's done previously, or at least last year. But he's always had good numbers at the AHL level. He did have a 67-point season out of 60 games for Laval Rockets a couple of years ago. And then also Providence Bruins, he had 55 points in 59 games. So this is a guy who can produce at the AHL level. That's a given. And overall, with his skill set of just being pretty fast, he's not Jet Luchenko fast. He's not Owen Tippett fast, but he's kind of like a hair underneath those guys. And right now, the Flyers are having trouble generating offense. We're going to go deep dive into that soon. But I'm interested to see what he can do. I think a lot of people probably on the surface will want to see Samu Tuomala get called up, who's actually a point per game right now also, doing well at the AHL level. But it's a little early for that. You don't want to call him up early, send him back down. He's not like Andre, who's like pretty much NHL ready, and that was clear in preseason. Tuomala kind of missed some time. He's not like dominating the NHL, but he's doing really well. He's continuing what he did last year. That's the type of guy in Tuomala that you would really ideally want to call up about midway through the year, and will probably happen, to be honest with you, with injuries and whatnot. So I think Richard was kind of the perfect guy, and we talked about it before the season that Richard would be that guy. So I think it's a good move. I think he probably will take Delorier out of the lineup. I know a lot of people will assume that it's going to be like Bobby Brink or something, but I think it's a good chance that it's going to be Delorier, and that Richard is going to play with Noah Cates and Hathaway. We'll see. I've been wrong about Tortorella's lines plenty of times, but that would be my assumption, or at least how I would roll into it. And he might spark something here. Sometimes you just bringing a new guy into the room who's kind of skating fast and creating chances, might spark some things, because the Flyers could definitely use it right now.
Yeah, I think the Richard call up for me, it's
Oh.
not to say a no-brainer or anything, but I would definitely say that it looks like a call-up that you should make just based on the way he played in preseason, right? You can argue that he probably should have made the team out of camp. If you really look at offensive production, he was one of the most productive players for the team in preseason. He obviously produced more offensively than Jet Luchenko. So if you look at it from a complete offensive production standpoint, like he probably deserved to make the team. They obviously had different reasons for why he did not. Give Luchenko a little bit of a taste, and then maybe you bring a guy like him up later. He does have 9 points so far to begin the season in 7 games, so he's off to a really quick start. He's probably been one of the Phantom's best offensive players, if not most impactful offensive players. He is a guy, who he wasn't like picked high or anything in the draft, but still a 4th-round pick, and has managed to, get some NHL games in with the Canadiens, with Boston in the past. So we'll really see if he can stick at the NHL level here for the Flyers. I do think for a team that's struggling to produce a lot of offense, like Philadelphia is at 5-on-5, any injection of speed into the lineup is probably welcomed, because typically with guys that have speed, they can create a lot of offensive opportunities, not only for themselves, but for, teammates around them as well. So I think having a guy with speed like Richard as this call-up for Poehling is important. And you also have to factor in, with losing Poehling, his main impact and the main thing that he brings to the team is his speed, right? So if you're losing a guy who's a really big speedster in Poehling, it makes a lot of sense to call up a player like Richard who has a similar, skill with his speed to kind of replace that loss of Poehling. So
Yeah, great point. And I forgot to mention that, Ryan Poehling has been placed on the IR. We know he didn't play against the Canes. Torts did say he had some family concerns, but clearly there's some kind of injury there too. Not that surprising in the amount of shot blocking he's been taking, and just watching him go down. So he's probably just a little banged up. I don't think it's a long-term loss for the Flyers. Definitely not one that they needed right now.
Yeah, their center depth isn't great.
Right.
So losing a center probably isn't the best for this team, you would say.
Yeah. But with Richard, it's another weapon. And a lot of guys right now need to be pushed on this team, to some degree, at least offensively. I'm not going to complain too much about their defensive game, but offensively, they could use a guy to come in and maybe he'll score. You know what I mean? He's capable of scoring at the pro level. So, and he's not that old. I don't think he's ever going to become like a star, at the NHL level. But he
Could
might
be a
find a
third
home.
liner.
Yeah, he might find a home in the NHL. We've seen other guys kind of do well at the NHL level and then find roles outside of the Flyers, temporary ones. Just he's like a perfect swing guy from what I can tell right now. Only with probably the best skating we've seen of any Flyers call up, which is the exciting part about him. While he's not like a high end player in any sense, he does have high end skating. And typically, a lot of call up players that we do call up that are in their late mid to late 20s, they don't have anything that really sticks out, that are not
Yeah.
prospects, and he does. So that at least is a plus, is that he's not like, a complete throwaway type of guy
Yeah.
who's just a banger.
There's talent.
Bang and
There's
crash.
talent there for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the other piece of news, and this is late, but I want to announce it on here anyway. Not that surprising considering his start, but Matvei Michkov did win Rookie of the Month. At the time, he had, I think it was 9 points in 12 games that he won Rookie of the Month. He currently stands with 10 points in 13. So pretty big deal. Can't remember the last time a Flyers rookie won Rookie of the Month. Not that big of a surprise considering the impact he's made on this team offensively. I honestly think if the Flyers weren't struggling so much at 5-on-5 scoring, and he has made some beautiful setups, and people just have not been able to bury them. He probably should have more points than what he has. Now, that's coulda, woulda, shouldas. But for a rookie, I mean, 10 points in 13 games. Again, he's slowed down a little bit, but the Flyers have slowed down offensively, so I definitely don't put it on him. But exciting. We'll talk about the second half of this story, but exciting to see that Michkov has come in and has been as advertised. Again, we will have Steve Kornianos on here in the beginning of December, so a little less than a month from now. He's going to be on the podcast. We're definitely going to talk about Michkov. We're also going to talk all about Flyers prospects in general, and probably a taste of the upcoming draft and where the Flyers sit right now. I'm sure a lot of you want to hear that. But again, pretty awesome. Love seeing it. And I think it's really just a taste of things to come, regardless of the ups and downs throughout the year.
No, I totally agree. I think Michkov, in terms of a start for a rookie, you really couldn't expect much more. I mean, obviously, I think Flyers fans in general had high expectations despite what Daniel Briere and the staff were kind of saying, and they were trying to kind of hold things off. But just looking at his skill, what he's done at the KHL level, I mean, the fans were expecting him to come in and, show some of that to begin, and he has done that. And to your point, like, there's been numerous plays, I would say, where he set up teammates and they haven't been able to finish or haven't been able to corral his pass. So I think his 10-point total right now, like 10 points in 13 games, could be even potentially higher. If some of those chances were finished or if some of them, were potted. I will say for Michkov, obviously, there's certain things in his game that the Flyers want him to work on, and we're going to get into that, and that's kind of our next segment here on him. But I think for a rookie and what he's done offensively, because that's the main crux of his game is the offensive play, he's really looked good at the NHL level. I think there's still some things that he probably needs to learn in terms of what he can do with 5-on-5 and how to kind of be more effective and create more chances there versus the power play, but that's all going to come. He's only 19, so there's still a lot of an adjustment. One thing to mention too, before we kind of get into the other half of the story, is Michkov has become the third Flyers player in the past 30 years to register his first 10 career points in 13 games or fewer. So he joins JVR, who had 10 points in 9 games in 2009-10, and he also joins Mike Richards, who had 10 points in 11 games played back in 2005. So pretty good company for him.
Yeah. And I think he's better than both of them. And that's kind of what I was saying, right? If the
Mhm.
Flyers weren't struggling offensively so much, I think he would be above a point per game player right now. Again, you're only talking about 3, 4 points
Yeah, exactly. There's
to
definitely a
to
couple
reach
of
that.
plays. There's definitely a couple of plays where you could have had probably people score or capitalize on the chance he set up, but
Yeah, didn't
what can
happen.
you do? Exactly.
Yeah. So the second half of this is obviously there's been some, let's say, friction. I don't even want to call it friction, but there's been some like coaching going on. And I'm sure people will get uncomfortable with it. But Michkov only played 2 minutes and 52 seconds in the third period against the Canes. He had no shifts in the last 6 minutes. He was not the first time he was benched at the beginning of the previous game as well. For the beginning, was it the previous game or was it the one before that?
Yeah, the Boston
The
game
Boston
in the
game.
first period,
Yeah.
he didn't get much shifts, if any, I don't think.
Yeah, right. He got like the beginning. He had a horrible turnover in the beginning of the game, and to Tortorella's credit, he benched him for a little bit, put him on the power play, didn't play him much on 5-on-5, and then played him normally for the rest of the game. So I actually liked the way that Tortorella handled that. I thought that was very consistent with how he treats everybody. Again, he's not picking on the guy. He legitimately, Michkov made a terrible play in the defensive zone, and there needs to be ramifications for that. Again, you're 19 years old. You're not above the other players on the team, even if you're more talented. And I think it's just a maturing process for Michkov as he develops his overall game in the NHL. And these were aspects of his game that we knew existed already coming into it and something he needed to work on. And I think he knows that too. So I don't think it's like a huge shocker to him. And again, coming from Russia, and this was something we talked about in the offseason, playing for Ska, like we see the way that they've handled Demidov at times, even though he's exceptional prospect, also has great games and on a high scoring team, he's putting up points and everything. He still has been benched at times. He still has been scratched overall, right? So he comes from an environment with consequence anyway, and a rough treatment of young players. So I would say if this is the worst Tortorella is doing to him, he's not doing anything bad. And I'll say this, and then I'll pass it on to you. I will say though, on one hand, I do understand why he benched him in the third period against Carolina. One, the team, we'll get into that, but the team didn't look great, especially offensively. But I don't think he played poorly in that game. I don't think it was like the Boston game. And if anything, leading up to the third period, I actually thought he was one of their best players offensively, and he was one of the only players really creating chances and driving play. And that indicated in the analytics, he didn't have a great analytical game, but I didn't think he was bad enough, and I didn't see any huge glaring mistakes. So I can't say I was searching for them either. And again, I'm not Tortorella, so that's why I don't have a huge problem with it. But I was a little taken back just because, um, you know, a lot of guys don't seem to have it right now. Having said that, there are other players who are playing better defensively than Michkov, and that has somewhat been an issue this season. It's gotten better of late, but I don't know. It was a little surprising.
Yeah, I think just for the benching with Michkov, there's two tails of the tape, really, essentially. Like, if you look at it from Tortorella's perspective, especially when you go back to the Boston game, there's certain defensive tendencies that he sees, and
Mm-hmm.
he's probably saying, okay, this is a learning experience. Let's sit him down. We'll still play him on the power play. We'll continue to play him later on in the game, but I want to sit him to try to, make so the kid can essentially have a mental note and say, hey, okay, I probably shouldn't do that again. Look where it's gotten me, right? And it's supposed to be used as a tactic to help motivate him to learn, to get better, and also to point something out and say, hey, this isn't the first time you've done that, because Tortorella mentioned that this wasn't the first time that he missed the coverage in that way, right? It's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
they've been pointing this out to him. He's continuing to make the mistake, so that's when they have to, take further action if it's not being corrected in game after the coaching has been done before the benching. So that's one side of it that I understand. But to go ahead with it for essentially the second straight game of doing it, that's what I don't agree with the younger player, especially of his capacity. I think in a sense, right, I wasn't looking for glaring mistakes either, but I didn't see anything that glaring or as glaring as the Boston game. And obviously Michkov looked like one of their better players in terms of offensive, chance creation. He had the assist on the power play. So he was factoring into the offense in a game where the Flyers were essentially in an offensive battle with Carolina. And, they were in that 4-4 game with considerably less shots than them. So that's where it becomes puzzling for me, where you're a team that's struggling in terms of offensive chance creation, sustaining pressure in the offensive zone. Matvei Michkov arguably might be one of your best, if not your best offensive player in terms of creating chances, being able to back, defenses off, but also draw defenders into him and create, space and opportunities for his other teammates. So that's what puzzles me about it is you're in a 4-4 game. You need to win. You desperately need the points at this juncture, just based on, the recent kind of lack of wins and lack of success the teams had to start. So I just think if you're a team desperate for wins, why would you bench a guy that has been one of your best offensive players to start, right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely brings up some questions. Here's the thing. I was telling you prior to recording that I was taking these kind of leadership. It's called Scrum Master courses. You probably know what it is, but for those of you who are not aware of it, it's a form of project management essentially that comes from the tech world. So I was taking these courses. I'm getting certified in it. So, but the one thing I wanted to bring up from it is, we talked about conflict in there, and I was actually one of the only people to speak up on it. I was the only person. And the professor asked, like, there's these things called retrospectives where you kind of like look back as a team and you look back at what you did during every single period of work. And then, a lot of times what you kind of look for is for people to bring up what didn't go well. It's kind of like a venting period. And he asked, like, is conflict good? And I was the only one to answer and said, yes, it is. When conflict is good, I was like, it's usable. And he was like, yes. And this guy's
outcome. There's an outcome from conflict, right?
Yes, it's part of it is venting, get like letting the air out, right? Rather than letting it build. But we've seen times, right? We saw Nick Seeler yelling at people on the bench. We saw him having at it with Torts. And I think to a lot of people, when they look at stuff like that, they see it as like a negative, right? But there is a positive that comes from conflict. It's not always positive. I'm not irrational enough to think that if you see people yelling at each other all the time, it's a good thing. But, we didn't see anybody yelling in this case, but you can tell this is what Tortorella is talking about. That's why I completely understood what he was talking about when he was saying this, is that he is trying to create some sort of friction to light fire and address issues, right? So, like, let's be honest, dude, Michkov is an incredible talent, right? We want him to get to that next level. We want somebody pushing him. And he seems like the type of guy who might actually want that as well. So, and again, not knowing him personally. So I think to some degree, while it makes us uncomfortable to watch these moments, and maybe we don't even agree with them, right? We're a little bit on the outside too. Some of the benefit is probably not going to be noticed by us initially. And by us, I mean the royal us, like the fan base.
Yeah.
Like we won't really see the results of that friction early, but we will see it later. Like how many players have we seen in the NHL who have not been living up to their name and in some respect of their, talent, and then never really adjusted that part of their game, right? Where when you're here with Michkov, he's so young, right? He doesn't turn 20 till December. And you have a moment to address it where he's more humble. He's not set in his ways. He hasn't defined his name fully in the NHL. He's not making $10 million a year, right? Like this is kind of the best time to do this.
It's easier to implement something like that now with a younger player, right? To point something out, like you said, before they're making the huge money, before they're the big superstar and scoring all the goals. This is where you kind of make those adjustments and try to catch it early. So I get it from that perspective, definitely. I think it's like, it's a motivational tool, right? Like Tortorella is doing this for a reason. He wants him to improve. It's because he sees certain things that he thinks that Michkov can probably do better, right? And that's almost a credit to Michkov because Tortorella thinks of him that highly that he realizes, hey, like you have this talent, you can, certainly execute on these certain things we're trying to do within our system a little bit better. He likely believes that, so that's probably why he's singling him out and kind of benching him in this situation. I just think from the other side of the coin, you have to think, okay, long-term development's important. At the end of the day, the Flyers aren't really competing for a Stanley Cup here, so the whole goal should be to, you really want to develop your players the best way possible. But then in a sense, you also have to add that with him being, such an offensively gifted weapon in that 4-4 game, ideally you'd want to have him out there. So there's two sides to it. But I think going ahead, like instead of this becoming a trend, they really need to let him work through it because as a player, the only way you're going to learn, it's not from sitting on the bench, it's from playing, getting reps, and showing that you've learned from the potential mistakes that, have been pointed out, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to need to get him that ice time and let him show that he can kind of work through whatever, they want him to adjust within his game.
Yeah. I mean, there was the one consequence of him at 3-on-3 where he didn't play defensively well against Edmonton, right? And that goal, I wouldn't say is caused by him, but his lack of defensive awareness in that moment led to that situation, just the two players being wide open. And if you can refine that stuff, look, we still complain about Morgan Frost to some, not so much us, but the fan base complains about Morgan Frost quite a bit. But his defensive game has not been the issue at all anymore. Tortorella and Shaw and company, they did improve Frost as a two-way player. And maybe he hasn't broken out offensively like we were hoping, but he is not a burden on the ice when he's in his zone, when he's on the back check. So, and that's really what they need to address with somebody like Michkov. They don't need to address his offensive production. He's already producing at a point per game pace at such a young age. So if they can get his defensive game refined more, he becomes such a valuable player. And I do look at the examples of what has been done, and I wonder about even guys like Bobby Brink, right, who clearly has offensive skills, and Tortorella has, echoed that. But if they can just fix the two-way element of their game, they become much better players. So we have to trust in Tortorella. I understand people's skepticism as well, but part of me doesn't mind it when the team is not doing well. Like there needs to be something done by the coaching staff, right? And you have this guy who you're hoping will lead your offense every single night. And if he's and he hasn't played as amazing every night, right? We saw a couple games where he was a little invisible, right? So it's like, if he can not be invisible offensively in those games, but still make an impact defensively, he just becomes such a more valuable player. And I think he is definitely smart enough and aware enough on the defense. He's still a little young, so his strength isn't where it will be, like to win puck battles and everything. We have to remember that when we see him lose puck battles, he will eventually win those. But if he can become an impact defensively too, hell, he might be playing the PK one day and setting up, other, like him and Luchenko could end up being a PK unit, in 3-4 years down the line for all we know.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's get to the meat and potatoes and what the hell is wrong with the Philadelphia Flyers, right? There's a lot going wrong right now, but some good too. It's not a complete disaster. I think their record is a little deceiving. A lot of their losses have come to good teams. For instance, their loss against the Canes, where they lost 6-4, 6 being the empty netter. So they lost a pretty close game, at least scoreboard-wise. Carolina shellacked Boston prior to that. Boston did beat the Flyers, but they beat Boston 8-2. So the reality is Carolina came in with a lot of confidence. And the Flyers,
they're a good team too.
Yes, they are a good team, but they also came in with a lot of confidence. And they're rolling right now. And the Flyers are not rolling right now. They have improved defensively, for sure. But the offensive game is not there. The fact they scored 4 goals in that game, that is a win. However, putting up 6 shots total in the second and third period, this is a trend that we definitely did not anticipate coming in from last season, and one we have seen vastly too often this season. And I think there's rooted problems to it. I'm happy they were playing better defensively, but you cannot continue to just play defense all game long and expect to win games. So before we talk about anything positive, let's just talk about that element first. The shot creation is not there. And the thing that's driving me, and I keep saying this, but they're not shooting early. Like 10 shots is fine. They outshot Carolina in the beginning, in the first period, 10-8, right? Which is actually pretty impressive for where Carolina is right now and how good they are at shot suppression. But they're still holding the puck way too long in the offensive zone. And the thing that's killing me even more than that is that they keep waiting for perfect passes. And you can see it by the score of this game. They had 3 goals or whatever scored on 6 shots. So they did at one point, actually, they were pretty even in scoring chances until Carolina took over at the end of the game. And then Carolina just completely walked away with it because Flyers just couldn't generate anything in the offensive zone. But I think their rooted problem in all of these games is that they are not creating chaos with their shots. I don't know if Tortorella is telling them this or not, but the fact that they are not shooting every single time they're around the net, one, it's a confidence problem, but it needs to be at the core of their offense. It's what they did last year. They can't wait for perfect plays. They can't always try to get into the middle to the dangerous areas. Sometimes you just want to get it on net for a deflection, for a face-off opportunity, for an ability to cause chaos. They are not shooting low at the pads. Like little details like that, I think it's part of what's hurting them. And then as the game goes on, which we've seen, their shots kind of like disappear, or they start that way where they're just vastly too predictable, where they're looking for the high danger scoring chance, which makes sense. But even when it's not available, they're still looking for it. And it's driving me nuts. And obviously the lack of puck support as a unit, it's improved at times, but then it regresses. And I saw it regressing in the middle of the game. And you saw the team stretch out way too far again, where the D is way back and the offense is rushing up. And it's like, no, you need to move up as a unit and you need to just get the puck on net. Keep it simple. And I feel like they're not. And that's part of what's creating a lot of their offensive problems, which is now manifest into a lack of confidence in the offensive zone, especially for guys, in the I guess the bottom 3 lines of the lineup.
Yeah, I think the lack of confidence offensively really is a big factor here. It's also just a combination too of a lot of different guys the Flyers were relying on taking steps forward early on in the season. They really haven't been producing so well. It's really mainly been the top of the lineup guys that have been keeping the team afloat offensively. So that's your, Michkov, Couturier, Konechny, obviously Sanheim from a defensive standpoint on the back end. But you have guys like Tippett, Frost, Farabee, Brink to an extent. He scored a little bit. But other than that, than last game, right, like Frost and Tippett ended up scoring. But before that game, they were, ice cold. Same with Joel Farabee, ice cold. So when you're not getting, as a team, secondary scoring, it can be tough, right? And the Flyers have been averaging around 2.2 goals a game offensively, essentially, for much of the season so far. So it's really a tough situation, I would say, for them offensively. Like when you look at it, I think it is a lot of it related to lack of shots on goal, lack of offensive sustained pressure, right? I thought last game, to be fair, was probably one of the Flyers' best games, actually sustaining pressure in the offensive zone. They actually had a couple shifts where they were cycling around the zone. And that's why I tweeted after the game, I said they probably fared better. Like they got shellacked in terms of shot opportunities, like shot attempts on net by the Canes. And that was still one of their best games of the season, right? So that just shows that like there were a little bit of improvements in terms of like offensive zone, puck control, sustaining the puck in the offensive zone, but just not shooting the puck enough. And what I do think it is lack of confidence as a player, it almost makes you search for that perfect play because you think to yourself, like, how I'm not going to score off this shot, or, we need that like backdoor setup, tap in goal because nothing's going right for us. But realistically, they should be trying to keep it simple. That's the best thing to do for a struggling offensive team. They should be looking for shots from anywhere, deflection shots, greasy type goals in front of the net. And that's really just not what the team has been doing, unfortunately. And you got to just factor in, right? Like if your team on an average basis, which is what the Flyers have been doing, is essentially every game having less than almost 25 shots per game on net, you're not going to win that often, right? Like you need to be able to outshoot your opponents at certain times, that was a staple of the Flyers offense last season. And it's not something they've done much this season at all. So I do have some stats just to kind of dig into really how bad this offense has been, and it hasn't been good, unfortunately. So in terms of goals for per 60 minutes, the Flyers are third worst in the league with a 2.79 expected goals for per 60 rating. In terms of shots for per 60, the Flyers are also third worst in the league, 24.32 shots for per 60 rating. In terms of Corsi for percentage per 60 minutes, the Flyers are second worst in the league, and that's 51.52% Corsi for per 60 rating. And for those that don't know, Corsi is essentially like which team, while they're on the ice, is going to control and dictate play more, and will have more of their chances turn into goals. So the Flyers really haven't been creating a lot, and that does lend into their lack of shots on net, right? Because if you're not putting the puck towards the net, it's really hard to create chances. Aside, from the offense, though, it's puzzling because their defense has really actually turned it around. Essentially, in the last, I believe, 5 games, they've only allowed 14 goals against in 5 games. So that's not bad at all. Where in that previous run, when they were going back to back against the Caps and Minnesota, in 3 games, they let in like 17 goals. So the defense has improved. Their expected goals against per 60 is only 2.49. But once again, right, their expected goals for per 60 is a 2.79 rating. So you have to factor in, like, if you're allowing in like a potentially like 2.5 goals a game and you're only scoring around that same metric, it's going to be really hard to win games, right? You're at least going to need that goals for metric to rise by at least a 0.5 percentage to try to, match the goals that you're allowing. So the Flyers just really haven't been scoring, but their defensive game has come around. And Sam Erson's been pretty good in net. Kolosov, we're going to get into obviously the goaltending as well, but it's really been more the offense that kind of explains their struggles so far. It's just, if you can't score more than 2 goals a game consistently, it's going to be really tough to win, on a regular basis in the NHL at this point. And one thing I did want to point out, and the stats a little bit not irrelevant, but I thought it was an interesting stat, and Jim from High and Wide brought it up the other day. So shout out to Jim, but he stated through 12 games, so this was obviously before the Carolina game, no other Flyer center scored a goal aside from Sean Couturier, whose 3 goals all came in 1 game. So obviously Frost scored last game, so now he's on the board, but combined, they only have 4 goals from their center position this season. That's just unacceptable, right? Like, I don't know about other teams in the NHL, but I'm sure that's one of the least in terms of like offensive goal production from the center ice position. The Flyers are probably at the bottom of the barrel with only 4 goals from their centerman.
Well, I will say Lawton has 2 goals, but he wasn't playing center in that game where he did score those 2 goals. So it's a fair assessment.
I didn't realize that. That's true. But either way, it was an interesting stat. But the main point really, and kind of what Yariv and I are trying to get at, is, and I'm sure everybody else kind of realizes from watching the games, is that just the offense has not been there in terms of goal scoring. And the high danger chance creation hasn't been great either. Like, I've kind of been tracking every game as we go because I do the live tweets for the Flyers Nitty account. And I'm always looking at the scoring chance creation. And to be honest, over like the last, over like out of the first, I think, 13 games that they've played here, like, I believe at least 10 out of 13, maybe more, they've been outchanced in terms of scoring chances. Like, it's just not sustainable, right? Yeah. Sustainable formula to win, unfortunately.
Yeah, I also don't think that this will persist all season? I know people like to think,
Tons of cold streaks. I that's what I wanted to mention, right? Like they have so many guys like Frost, Tippett,
yes,
Farabee that are all
Forrester.
cold at the same Forrester, yeah, that are all cold at the same time. Like it's gonna turn around, but it's just like if it continues for any longer, you've already taken such a considerable chunk of your season away that it's detrimental to come back
You
from,
know what's
right?
annoying about them not shooting enough last game is that the luck was actually there. If you
Yeah.
look at the TK goal and you look at the Frost goal, like not that the Frost goal was pure luck because actually it was a beautiful setup and he got just enough of it to put it in the net. Doesn't matter if it wasn't like a speed shot
That's a
in the
guy
net.
who just can't buy one. Like even fans on an empty net and it just happens to go in like off his
Right.
skate
But
randomly. You could tell he's not feeling it, right?
but again, the luck was there. It went in.
Yeah.
It didn't go wide. You look at the goal that TK scored, where it was slightly tipped off his stick and rolled
Yeah.
through the 5 hole. Like that was like they probably shouldn't have had that game tied with the amount of shots they were getting on net, but they still managed to score. The shot attempts were 87 Carolina to 36
Yeah, they got
Philadelphia.
shellacked in terms of shot attempts, man.
Yes. And I think a lot of that came at the second half of the third period where Carolina was just working them at that
Yeah.
point. But I think part of that problem came from just the Flyers. One, the gaps got real wide, which they weren't doing to start the game. And they weren't doing that against Boston. Boston was more just bad luck with scoring. Like, that's the thing. It's kind of a little bit something different every night that is causing their lack of scoring or their bad play. I also think they will get out of this. Like, I don't think we're going to see this for the entire year. They might fall back into another slump for sure. It's a shame that they started their season this way. We have seen the team struggle to score at times, but it's not really the struggling to scoring that's even freaking us out. It's the inability to get shots on net and generate any kind of offensive momentum throughout an
Yeah.
entire 60-minute period. Because at this point last year, they had several games where they were just a pain in the ass to play against. And I don't think they've been a pain in the ass to play
No.
against consistently this year. They've had periods, they've had times, instances in games, but they haven't been able to generate the offensive side of the game on a consistent basis to match their defensive effort. Because the
Well,
defense has improved
yeah,
dramatically.
it has. Yeah,
It's
like
not
and
terrible.
that's why I wanted to point those stats out before that. Like if you look at how many goals they were allowing earlier in the season compared to the last little stretch, they've allowed way less in this like stretch of 5 games compared to a 3 game stretch earlier in the season where they allowed like considerably a more amount of goals. So
Yeah.
I would say the defense has improved. I mean, the offense for me, like it's just tough because obviously they're all struggling. And I mean, it's easy to say, well, just get a lot of shots on that, get a lot of shots on that, right? And
Sure.
that's the symptom of it because these guys are struggling so much that they want to look for that perfect play. And that's kind of what causes them to not take the shots, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's almost a symptom of the struggles is a reason why they're not shooting in a sense. But you have to look at it too, like their forecheck ability. I mean, they haven't really been cycling the puck as much. Like I can only really put and pick out a handful of games where they've had shifts and sustained pressure in the offensive zone
Totally.
for minutes at a time. I think Carolina was one of those games. That's why I kind of said they
Yes.
deserved a better fate because there's been tons of games this season where they didn't have, 2 or 3 shifts at all strung together where they were able to kind of keep the puck in the O zone and really put pressure on another team's defense. And that was a huge part of this Flyers offense last season that they were very go, tons of shots on net, and they were pinning teams in their defensive end a lot. And we haven't seen a lot of that this season with the forechecking. I do think a lot of it too is we haven't seen the rush offense be as prevalent either, right? So a lot of chances the Flyers created last season off the rush. Some of them were goals, but some of them you'd also end up, getting a face-off. Play starts in the offensive zone, you get possession. That's more time for you in the offensive zone. I do think, though the defensive has improved, to your point, Yariv, right, with the gaps kind of opening up in the last game, and we've seen the gaps, be wide between the defensemen and the forwards in prior games, and the support not be adequate enough. But the defense has had trouble getting the puck up to the forwards through the neutral zone and actually move the puck into the zone, and have clean control offensive zone entries. So I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things going wrong at once for them, but to be quite honest, the main crux of it is the lack of shots. Like if you're only, like I said, if you're only getting under 25 shots every single game consistently, like most teams in the NHL are not winning with that formula.
Yeah,
So
and there are countless times throughout every game where I'm yelling at the TV for them to
shoot the
shoot.
puck.
Yes, because the shot is available and they double clutch and wait for a pass. And then the
Yeah.
pass is killed or neutralized.
And then
through
the play turns around and you have the other team either pin them in the zone because they were looking for a play or sustain, offensive pressure, where realistically, you taking that shot, like you're saying, even if it doesn't create a scoring chance, the worst case scenario is you get an offensive zone draw where you can maybe regain possession, right?
Yes, and not only that, it's the chaos that brings, that a shot brings, because this is actually, if you look at the Flyers versus Carolina in that third period, Carolina was shooting on every opportunity they had, no matter if it was every single angle. A lot of them weren't even high danger scoring chances at all, and it was a little bit deceiving. But if you look at the way the Flyers behave, right, they start going out of position, they have to drop down to drop for a shot. Like, these are the things that generate offense and opportunities for the players around you. And this is what I mean is like, yeah, you might not have a great shot on net. Take it anyway. Cause the defense to move. Because if you're just sitting
to make a save, yeah,
or something, cause action because you're not pulling your opposition out of position at all, right? They can just they just stay collapsed around their goalie and wait for you to make a move. And then the Flyers, while they have enough talent to score, they're not the most talented team in the league. So you're not cutting through a bunch of guys and doing wow goals every single night. You need to keep it simple, and you need to play just fundamental hockey. And a lot of that is playing really tough defense, which I think they are working towards. And to be honest with you, I have this weird gut feeling the Flyers are actually finding their way out of this. It might not feel that way right now, but the fact that they did have 4 goals against Carolina and were able to score, and I think it is finding its way out. Will it be too late? Potentially, at the time they do it, but I do not think that this is something that will be prevalent all year round. Like, these guys will not struggle throughout an 82 game season. But right now, they need to start putting the puck on net on every single opportunity they have.
Just to finish that off too, them scoring 4 goals the last game, it's a great point because I mentioned it last night on Twitter as well that it's the first time they've scored 4 goals since the 26th against the Wild. So it's been a little bit, almost over a week, right? So it is a good sign to see a team having trouble scoring get more than 2 goals on the board, because consistently lately they have not been able to in most of their outings. And a big part of that, I think, is Couturier and Konechny, at least for the last game. They were probably the best offensive players for the Flyers. So you got to look to your best players to draw them out of this. And I would say Konechny, obviously on fire with a 4-point game against the Canes, and Couturier had a really great game as well. And he's looking a lot better offensively since that 5-point game and kind of onward. So I think
he's been their second best player behind TK.
Yeah, that's my thoughts as well.
At least on forward.
I would say, if they are going to get them, or if they are going to get out of this and out of this slump, they're going to need some support from the secondary scoring here. But it is obviously a great sign that you do have your top players at least scoring to some degree.
Yeah, I think maybe they should try a little bit of line adjustments if they don't get out of it. I don't necessarily think for next game, but if they have similar problems, like maybe try Farabee with Couturier and Konechny. I think it's worth a shot, but we don't know. Well, I don't necessarily mind, I don't want to tear apart that line that did well with Tippett, Couturier.
Yeah,
and
you
TK,
want to get
right?
him, you want to get Tippett going a little bit, so I could see them keeping it together.
Which is huge. He actually had one of his better games. Finally, he looked more like himself again. So I do think they're kind of working through it. We'll see how things go. But, I will say this. A lot of people, and look, maybe you don't agree with me on this, but I don't think this beginning of the season is as important as everybody is claiming that it is. Like right now, the Nashville Predators are tied for the Flyers with the worst record in the NHL. I don't think Nashville is the bottom of the league team. I don't think the Flyers are the bottom of the league team. Do I think the Flyers are one of the best teams in the league? No, absolutely not. Especially the way they're playing this year. But, you look at the fact St. Louis was terrible to start the entire first half of their year, and then won the Stanley Cup. You look at Edmonton, who started off god awful last year, also is not doing great right now either, and went to the Stanley Cup last year. Does not mean you want to start this way. It's just not a death nail, right? It's more actually important how you play in the second half of the year than the first half of the year. You just don't want to fall so far behind that those games are irrelevant,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
They need to stay above water. They need to put together another win streak of some sort, something beyond just 2 games, 4 or 5 games would be nice. They have a really tough schedule right now. That shouldn't be forgotten. They're playing some of the best teams in the league. And they're
Yeah.
not playing well. So the combination of the two is not great.
No, I agree with your point. Like I do think that as the season moves on, you want to see a team get better, and play meaningful games down the stretch. I think that's why the start, in a sense, is so important, because they've played pretty poorly through the first 13 games. Obviously, they're the last place team right now. That's what I think makes the next 7 game stretch between game 13 upcoming here in 20. It's a crucial point for them in the season. It could be a turning point for them in a positive way, right? You have to look at it in that regards as well. I think if they continue this play through the next 7 games up until the 20 game point, usually we look at it this way, and this is the way I kind of look at NHL teams. Through 20 games, you have a pretty clear, concrete idea of what a team might be. So for the Flyers, you want to see them kind of rebound here, look to get the offense going in these next 7 games, because if they continue, to go this route, I think they will bounce back. I just think it will be too late, to your point, to have those later season games mean anything, right? So we have to hope that they bounce back in the next 7. It's probably like you want to see some urgency from them, because not to say that their season's on the line, but let's say you go like out of the next 7 games, you go 1-6 or something like that, or 2-5, like you're gonna have a really tough time, getting back into any sort of playoff conversation. So it's just the reality of it.
Yeah, for sure. They can't allow it to continue. Though it has gotten better, I think it's a little deceiving with the back-to-back losses, but again, they have to be more entertaining too, in the process. A lot of the Michkov pizzazz is kind of gone away from the fan base because they're just getting spanked, even though he's putting up points. People wanted to see what they saw last year plus Michkov, not a worse version of last year plus Michkov. Having said that, I'll add this. The positive is, as of right now, though this will not stay, if the Flyers hold on again, we've been saying from the beginning, Danny Briere is very smart. He set up insurance for this season, regardless. And this is a rebuilding year. And this is what I keep talking about. People say they want rebuilding, but when they actually get it, they freak out, which understandably so, because losing sucks. But as of right now, the Flyers stand with the first overall pick, based off standings, first overall pick without the lottery being involved, the 11th pick, which is Colorado, because they are struggling as well, the 14th pick, which is Edmonton, the 33rd pick, which is the Flyers again, the 38th pick, which is Anaheim, the 47th pick, which is Columbus, who's done better than expected, and then the 65th pick. So within the first 2 rounds, I guess that's their 3rd pick too, actually. So as of right now, if the season were to end this way, they're definitely locked and loaded for the draft. Though I will say this, I do not expect this year to be, or the draft to be completely devoid of moves. There will be something to kind of change stuff up.
And I would say too, like, I think the Flyers will make a good amount of those picks, but to make 6 picks as one team in 2 rounds, I would not expect all those draft picks to be taken. I would expect some sort of trades to happen, most likely.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting. Regardless of what happens this year, we knew it was a rebuilding year going into it. No matter where the Flyers finish, we knew that a lot of it was about building for next year.
They are prepared for the future with those draft picks. So, and
especially the following year, which is the first year where they're going to have like no cap issues.
Yeah,
theoretically. Okay, Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you're listening and you've gotten this far and you are not subscribed, please do so now. That's the best way to support this podcast. Give us a like to the video if you like what we're doing. Also hit the notification bell for notifications. And for the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow there as well. And give us a rating if you can. All of that is tremendously helpful. Okay, let's talk about the D pairings. So the Flyers did put out new D pairings. I got to say, I wasn't really a fan of them going into the game. I don't think they worked very well in the game. The D pairings as they stood last night was Sanheim and Drysdale as the top pairing, Sealer and Risto as the second, and Andre and Zamula as the third. Zamula came in for Erik Johnson, trying to get him some play. I didn't love that pairing on paper of Andre and Zamula. It did not work in execution either. That is not a surprise to me. I've been talking about that in the preseason. You do not want to put those two guys together. I was a little surprised they went that route. I think ideally they should have been playing Andre with Risto, which they did do at times during the game as well, and put Nick Sealer with Zamula. It does seem like Cam York is due to come back relatively soon. Yeah, he's on the trip with the team. So all of this is temporary anyway, and I assume that York will go back with Sanheim so they can have that top pairing to rely upon. I like the idea of Sanheim and Drysdale. Having said that, it with both of them being like the most offensive defensemen we have in the lineup, doesn't really allow for the role as strong. I'd prefer, to be honest, if they were going to go with this group, Sanheim with Nick Sealer, allow Sealer to play that defensive defenseman role, put Andre with Risto or something like that, which, again, don't love that either. Andre with Risto and maybe Drysdale with Zamula for a little bit, but I get why they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. Is why I don't love Andre and Zamula in the lineup at the same time. I think Andre's played better than Zamula, clear cut. I think Zamula probably should sit for the next game. I don't think he had a great game again. I don't know if they're going to do that. And I think Erik Johnson fits a lot more because he's just more reliable defensively.
You know what you're going to get from him, right? Whereas Zamula, not to say it's going to be an adventure on every shift, but sometimes it can be just with the way he's kind of outletting the puck. I will say the one reason they sat Zamula initially was they thought that he wasn't making plays quick enough, like the processing speed. One thing I will say, and I'll give him credit for the last game, there's a couple outlet passes I thought where he literally just got the puck, and as soon as he got the puck, it was off his stick and up the ice. And I think for him to be effective, and it's what we talked about in the offseason for Zamula, I think when he's thinking too much and there's a lot of hesitation to his game, it can be tough sometimes, and he can kind of make those brain fart type of mistakes where you see him turn the puck over because he's maybe overthinking it a bit. But I would say, Yariv, you're spot on. Like, these pairings without York, it's a little tough to kind of slot them in just in terms of roles, right? Because you have Sanheim, Drysdale, two offensive-minded guys. You ideally want to have Drysdale be your guy rushing the puck up the ice, but if you're going to be playing with Sanheim, he's kind of going to be doing that. So I don't think they meshed too well due to that. I think there was a couple situations where Sanheim was rushing up the ice and Drysdale was kind of sitting back, kind of unsure of like where to go, what to do. So I do think the best for the D is, you want to ideally have one puck mover, one, defenseman that's a little bit more of your stay-at-home type guy, right? I do think like Sanheim, York, when York comes back is something they stay with. Sealer, Risto, I don't know. I mean, if they stay with that, like two defensive guys, I think you'd ideally want to split Sealer and Risto lining up, correct?
Yeah, and that's kind of was my main crux too. They're just both defensive defensemen. I think Risto's played really well. So
yeah, he's been good so far.
Again, I don't know why they separated Risto and Sanheim. Maybe they wanted to stabilize a pairing, but it doesn't make sense because they put him with Sealer, who's been very stable. So, I think they should have just stuck with Sanheim and Risto and continued with Sealer and Drysdale. But again, they're
trying to make something work. Yeah.
They didn't play terrible. It's just Andre and Zamula didn't look great together and got burned.
Well, yeah, you have two puck movers, right? And that's kind of the the issue where you have two guys kind of looking to push the envelope up the ice, but who's taking care of, their own end and kind of around the net. And I think they're both young defensemen too. So obviously the
Right.
defensive game isn't going to be as strong as, some of the more veteran defensemen like a Sealer or Risto on the team. I do think though, like, and I mean, I predicted this to start the season that if Andre got an extended look, he was going to stick. And he's been a lot better than Zamula just by
Yes.
the eye test. So I do expect him to continue to remain in the lineup because how could you at this point really justify taking him out? It's pretty clear cut that he's been a better player than Zamula. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because I think they want to continue to develop Zamula. So he's not going to sit for long periods if he does. So it's either they're going to have to make it work with two puck movers or more of Eric Johnson, right? So I guess we'll have to see kind of once York gets back what happens.
Yeah, I imagine when York gets back, Andre and Risto are going to play together. Drysdale will play with Sealer. York will play with Sandheim.
And then
Which on
Zamula's
paper
kind
I
of your
like.
guy out. Yeah,
Yeah,
your odd man out in a sense.
yeah, he'll be in practice playing playing with Johnson. We'll see because they could get more banged up too.
It's possible.
You
Yeah.
know,
I do think Andre, to your point, like Andre Ristolainen would be a good pairing. They showed maybe a little bit of something last night. Obviously, we need to see more of a sample size, but I just think in theory, Ristolainen, that's your guy, winning the board battles, tough in front of the net, and Andre's kind of your transition guy up the ice, adds a little bit of an offensive element. But Andre, he's looked really good, which I think for a lot of Flyers fans, they've been waiting to kind of see him get an extended look. So that's, I think, one positive to kind of take out of the negatives so far, right? Is Andre has looked like a legit option for the defense.
yeah, I think he was like a -3 at one point last night. I don't know if he ended. I think he might have ended -2. In the end, yeah, he did. With Zamula and Risto. Risto's numbers are very deceiving because I thought he had a strong game. Probably the empty netter is probably what caught him there. But yeah, I think it's a little deceiving because I actually thought Andre was having a pretty good game. Where Zamula played like 11 minutes last night, so I think the coaching staff kind of. So I think it's a little bit of a confidence thing with Zamula too. Right now, he's playing a little worse than he's capable of for sure. I don't think he's as bad as he's played, but
like I said, right, a little bit too much thinking, it seems, where you're just a little unsure.
yeah. And now with Andre in the mix, I'm sure he's worried about his job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
He sees it. I mean, we see it. So if we see it, he sees it. Andre.
That's
Andre
what I mean. These players aren't dumb, so
right. Andre's got a higher ceiling than Zamula. He's younger and he's already better. So, something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the goalies before we get to the prospect section. So Kolosov was in net last night. Fedotov was backing up. Again, Ersson is injured at the moment. He is traveling with the team as well, so he's not out long term or anything like that.
He was practicing too the other day, so I think there's probably a chance that he plays on this road trip, most likely.
I think they would prefer that over putting Fedotov back in net, which does bring the question, what the hell are they going to do with Fedotov in the long term? I think there's a good chance they might send him to the AHL on a conditioning stint, to be honest with you, and label it as that, which means they'll have to call him back up, but just to get him playing because he's just sitting. But he's
not going to improve or get more accustomed to the NHL level or the North American game by, just sitting on the bench. So they got to do something with him.
I don't think Kolosov has been perfect, but again, he's 22 years old, rookie, just adjusting to the NHL game. I actually think he's looked pretty good. Not perfect. He's got things to work on. And obviously, I'll let you break down the more goalie perspective of it. But I liked what I've seen of him. Like, I see promise there. And if I think back to like Ersson's beginning of his career, also shaky at some times,
Similar.
And I think he might be a similar caliber goalie to Ersson in the end if he can kind of put it all together. Different style. I think Ersson's a lot more stable in net. The one thing I don't like from Kolosov, while he's very mobile goaltender, very agile, I think he moves a little too much in net.
Sometimes he's over moving in the sense.
Yes.
Well, over committing, but also like he'll be scrambling to make saves. So sometimes since he moves too much, he's taking himself out of position for like another save that he might be able to make if he didn't do that. But I mean, the goaltending, obviously Ersson's their number one guy. I think at this point, it's pretty clear cut that Kolosov's supplanted Fedotov. He's looked, a lot better than him, not just a lot, like more than just a lot, like um incredibly better than him in a lot of different aspects, right? I think it's more just the soft goals that's the difference. Like you saw Kolosov let in a lot of savable shots where you could point to it and say, not Kolosov, Fedotov would let in a lot of
Yeah,
savable
yeah.
shots, and you'd point to it and you'd say, well, that has to be saved. Not as much of that with Kolosov. Like there's a few over his starts that you'd want back, but he's getting accustomed to this level too. He's getting accustomed to NHL shooters as well. So there's going to be some growing pains, but in terms of shots that are savable, he's giving the Flyers a chance in games. Like look at that Boston game, right? He let two goals in. Like what else do you want from your backup goalie? You need to give him some goal support, right?
Right.
I would say too the Carolina game, like they were getting bombarded, as you said. Like the shot attempts were what, like 86-31 or something. Like they were getting bombarded with shots.
7-36.
Okay, yeah. They
Still.
were getting yeah, they're getting killed in the shot attempt. So just think about the pressure he's facing as a young goalie against a really good Canes team. Like he gave the Flyers a chance to win in that game as a backup, right? Like they were in the game till the end. That's all you can ask for. And I think that's kind of where you look at Kolosov to Fedotov, and Fedotov was not giving the team a chance to win games. Kolosov in every outing, that Montreal game, they were in that game a lot of it because of him. He made some big stops. The Boston game as well, and let in 2 goals. The Carolina game, they were in it right until the end. Should have probably went to overtime, right? So Kolosov, just based on his short, time already, he's shown that he can give the team more of a chance to win here. So I think that's the easy decision for the coaching staff to obviously have him be in that backup position. And I think you're correct in the sense that Fedotov, you got to get him playing, you got to get him into a conditioning stint, and then kind of see what happens from there. Once York comes back, they're going to have to do something because they're not going to be able to carry all 3 of these guys on the roster officially. So there's going to be some sort of movement to expect. Just in terms of like the goalie breakdown for Kolosov and kind of what I'm seeing from him. The rebound control has been shaky at times. It's something he'll need to clean up. I just think for the Russian goalies in general, Kolosov and Fedotov, they're not used to how much traffic is in front of them in the net and how players are kind of driving the net looking for rebound goals. It's not as prevalent in the KHL. Something to kind of work through. But from him, the real strengths are the lateral movement, quickness on the pads, quickness with the butterfly. Like he's shown all of that. He's shown a quick glove as well. So I just think for him, the one adjustment will be just because he's smaller. Teams are going to try to take advantage of him up top, like over the shoulder goals, top shelf type goals, high glove goals, high blocker goals. So he's going to have to find a balance between, okay, I want to drop to the butterfly early to make sure I can get across ice to make that lateral save or do something and make a save of my butterfly, but that's also going to open up the top half of the net. So he's going to have to be cognizant, but his pad work, butterfly work, really, really quick on his pad. So that's great to see from him just kind of entering the NHL level. Obviously it's going to improve as he kind of gets more accustomed. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And we didn't mention Tippett's goal in that game, but that was one of the sickest shots he's ever had, by the way.
yeah, he had a really, really nice shot. I mean,
Jim Jackson didn't
only
even
if
see
he
it go
could
in.
hit the net a little more
Yeah.
lately, right? He'd probably have so many more goals.
I know. Anyway. Okay. Let's get into our last segment. Let's just do the prospect updates. Again, we do this at the end of the show. We just go through the recent performances of prospects just throughout the league, or I'm sorry, throughout their respective leagues. I did have it open. What did I do? Yeah, there it is. So I'll do the I don't know, the first 19, and then you'll take the rest after that and
Sure.
do the goalies.
That works.
Okay. So again, just going through the list here. Just going through the list here of guys on the team. So these are, I guess, the more top performers. I give Vasili the shittier performers at the time, but games played
That's okay.
do matter. So Ilya Pautov still doing well in the MHL. He's got 17 points in 19 games, 5 goals, 12 assists. Not too bad. Jack Berglund, I did see a post, I think it was like NHL Pipeline or Flyers Pipeline, where they were like, oh, down on Berglund, and then they showed 3 points in 12 games, but they completely ignored his J20 games. So again, in the J20, he put up 12 points in 8 games. Now he did manage to put up some points. He had a goal and assist night, but he does have 3 points in 12 games. Again, transitioning to the men's league, kind of expected to some degree, especially a player like him. I expect that the points to go up as the season goes on, and probably next year he'll be full time pro player unless the Flyers decide to bring him over to the AHL. He's still very young, right? He's 18, kind of transitioning. So think of that as like AHL, 18-year-old playing in the AHL type of thing. So not too bad considering. I want to see how he does moving forward. Cole Knuble still doing well, 12 points in 8 games in the NCAA for Notre Dame, 6 goals, 6 assists in 8 games. Very good for him. Also +7. Alex Ciernik, 10 points in 14 games, 4 goals, 6 assists. Again, also playing against men, pretty good numbers. I'm interested to see what Steve has to say about all these guys as we are kind of tracking them, because I know he's watching a lot of them. Santeri Silku, still in 7 games, 6 goals, 3 assists, 9 points in Mestis. We'll see if maybe he gets promoted at some point if he continues to do that type of production. Anthony Richard, mentioned him earlier, 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points in 7 games. He's been the highest point per game percentage player for the Phantoms, so good on him, though he's not really a prospect. Samu Tuamala, 8 points in 8 games, 3 goals, 5 assists. I expect that he will definitely get a call up at some point during this season, and we'll see how he does, because I'm still looking forward to him making an NHL debut this season. Denver Barkey, again, was recovering from mono, but seems to be picking up his offensive game now. 8 points in 10 games. He's also a +6. So, again, he started off with like really no points at the beginning of the season, so he's been a point per game player since then. We'll see if that increases as things move forward. Spencer Gill, he's got 8 assists in 13 games. He's a +11. Pretty good for the second round pick. I want to see him score a little bit, but he's a long-term project, young like Luchenko, but not too bad. I want to see him get closer to a point per game, but he's .62 is not bad at all. Oliver Bonk, he's got 7 points in 10 games, 1 goal, 6 assists, slowing down a little bit. I'm not following London, so I don't know the roots of that exactly, but I'm hoping that he picks that up. Either way, he's going to be on the Phantoms next year. Mateo Mann, he's got 6 points in 13 games in the queue. He's like an overager, ready for that point. But nice to see he's contributing offensively. He is a mammoth defender, so would be nice if he at least turns out to be a good AHL guy. Oscar Eklund, he has 5 points in 8 games. Not too bad considering transitioning over. Seems to be doing okay. It's 25, so I don't know if that matters too much. Carter Sutherland did start putting up some points. He's got 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in 14 games. So doing better. He was a -17. He's a -16 now. I'm interested to see how he evolves as the season goes on. Owen McClellan, 5 assists in 7 games. No goals so far. Rodrigo Abels, he's got 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in 7 games. Not too bad, though. He did slow down a little bit. He was a point per game to start. Devin Kaplan, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in 7 games. Like to see him bump that up. This is probably his last year in the NCAA, potentially. And then I think the Flyers might want to bring him over to the AHL, but I don't know if he necessarily has that game. Ben Gleason, again, we brought him up earlier. He hasn't played for the Phantoms yet, so 0 points for the Phantoms, but he does have 1 goal, 3 assists, and 4 points in 7 games. Not bad at all for a defenseman. And then Ule Lixell, still not doing what he did last year, but he is starting to put up points at least. 4 assists in 8 games. He's half a point a game, which last year he was above a point a game. So a little surprising. Want to see Ule Lixell get going.
Yeah, I think it's tough for Lixell, right? Like, I think just not making the team is a little bit of a disappointment, and then the lines have been all just shuffled around the AHL, so probably not conducive.
Worse
to him
than the Flyers
succeeding to start here. But yeah, just to jump off, we have Austin Moline next in the USHL. He's got 4 assists in 13 games. He's more of a project type defenseman. Was a 7th round pick for the Flyers in the latest draft. So someone to monitor here just to see how he progresses. Alex Bump has started off strong, 3 points in 4 games for Western Michigan. Hunter McDonald, 3 points, 3 assists in 8 games for the Phantoms. So he's been playing well. He's a +1. Helge
plus
Grans,
plus three. You
oh,
met,
+3.
you read Gendron.
Yeah, I did. No worries. Thanks,
Yeah,
Yariv.
it
Um,
matters.
yeah, exactly. So +3 has been playing good. Gendron is a little bit confusing to me. Like he's got 2 points in 2 games, 1 goal, 1 assist. You would think they'd play him more. I every time we go over this, I'm just puzzled as to why he's only played a couple of games here. You'd
He's on
think
the
you'd want to get him into more games,
he's on the fourth
and
line tonight too. Fourth line
and
left
he's an
wing.
offensive guy, right? Like it's really just strange in terms of the development there. Yeah, then you have Helge Grans. He's got 1 goal, 1 assist. He's a -4 so far in 8 games. Ethan Sampson, he also has 2 points in 8 games, a goal and assist, and he's a -3. And then after that, we have Brian Zanetti, who's overseas with the SCL Tigers. Probably a guy you're never going to see come over here. After that, we have Zaid Wisdom, 2 assists in 6 games.
He is playing.
Once again,
He is playing with the Phantoms though, which is a good
yeah,
sign.
exactly. Which is good, right? Compared to the ECHL, kind of where he was last season. So
Yeah.
he's managed to stick so far. JR Avon, 2 assists in 6 games. And Elliot Denoyer, right? Just continuing at least the struggles from last season, only 2 assists in 7 games. You really like to see him pick it up because he had such a promising, rookie year in the AHL. So that's, a little bit of a disappointment to start. Then obviously you have Andre had one assist in 1 game. Obviously he's up with the Flyers now. Jet Lachenko has 1 assist in 3 games with the Guelph Storm. So not the greatest start for him, but I mean they have a really bad team. As we said, I think they got shellacked to start, and pretty much every game they have not been faring well. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think for his development, I mean if he gets traded to one of those contenders in the OHL, it's probably the best case scenario. But you know what? Getting to play a lot of minutes on a really bad team, it does prepare you for a lot. So it's not necessarily the worst thing. Noah Powell's got 1 assist in 6 games. He's a guy I thought would start off with a little bit more scoring punch just due to how kind of he scored so much in the USHL, but he's obviously moving up a level, so that factors in. Louis Belpedio, 1 assist in 8 games. He's a +3. Not surprising. He's probably one of the most solid defensemen the Phantoms have at this point. Ty Murchison, 1 assist in 8 games. He's also a +3. Rhett Gardner, 1 assist in 8 games. He's a -3. Ryan McPherson, 0 points for New Hampshire in the NCAA. So once again, another guy kind of moving a level up. I believe he was, playing at a much lesser level. I think in juniors last season compared to NCAA hockey. So it's a bit of an adjustment. Adam Yinning, 0 points in 8 games and a -2. And then Massimo Rizzo has not played. He actually, I believe, had an appendix injury or something along those lines, and he's been out for that reason.
Big loss for them because that's the type of player they need right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Center.
Yeah, they've been struggling to score similarly to the Flyers.
Worse.
And yeah, and then you have the goalies coming up next. So the cream of the crop, obviously, is Yegor Zavragin. In a total of 15 KHL games this season, he has a .928 save percentage and a 2.35 goals against average. So he's been killing it in the KHL. He's essentially SCA's starting goalie at 19, and that's unheard of at the KHL level. First of all, it's unheard of for a 19-year-old in the KHL to play regularly in general, but to be the starter for one of the best clubs in the league, I mean, it just kind of shows the pedigree that he has and the talent that he's shown thus far. So he's definitely the Flyers' top goalie prospect. He might be the top goalie prospect in the world at this point, just with the way he's been playing. So he's lights out, and it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of continues to progress in the KHL.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
It is, yeah. Carson Bjarnason with Brandon has really improved the save percentage over the last few games here.
Mm-hmm.
He's up to a .924 save percentage, 2.77 goals against, and that goals against being on a bad team that's never going to be super high. So really, with him, you want to focus on the save percentage, and he's looking like one of the top goalies. In the WHL.
I think he just had a shutout in his last
game. He did.
Too.
He did. Yeah, he has one shutout as well. So nice call out there, Yariv. After Bjarnason, we have Mate Tomek. Not sure if he will ever come over, but a 912 save percentage right now, 2.29 goals against in 7 games in Czechia, and he has a 5-2 record. E2 Makiniemi, 1-0-2 for the Phantoms right now, a 911 save percentage of 2.41 goals against. So he has been pretty good to start in the AHL. I'd imagine with Kolosov up, he's going to get a good amount of starts here, probably moving ahead and kind of be penciled into more of a starter role with Peterson as the backup.
Those numbers are not bad in 3 games. So
exactly, and he's a big goalie, so I think there is some promise there with him.
Yeah.
I mean, so we'll see what happens. Cal Peterson, 2 games so far. He's 1-1 in those 2 games with an 8.85 save percentage and a 0.3 goals against average. So nothing we're not used to with Peterson in terms of the numbers there. We've kind of expected him to kind of have those types of numbers at this point, but yeah, he's going to be more of a backup for the Phantoms, if anything, this season.
I will say in today's game against Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, the Phantoms are out shooting them actually 11-4, and Peterson has not given up a goal. So
progress for this
on
one.
4 shots. So that's good. Though he had a terrible first game. His second game was much better. He only gave up 1 goal. So he's still an okay AHL guy. I do want to see Makiniemi get more starts, though.
Yeah, you'd want him to be the backup.
Yeah, I want to build him up because we don't know what's going to happen with Fedotov. And like we were saying, like they should consider sending him down for a conditioning stint to get some games at the AHL level. I don't know how he'll feel about that. Maybe they don't want to disrespect him.
You have to play though as a goalie, right?
Well, right now Erson's hurt, so
Well, but I just mean in the sense that like you can't carry 3 goalies and just for the practicing, like there's only 2 nets. So like it's the age-old thing with goalies, right? Like you don't want to carry 3 on your NHL roster.
Yeah.
So
I guess we don't know how Fedotov looks at practice. Like he could look a lot better at practice and is just struggling in games.
It's possible, right? NHL's a whole new level. I'm sure there's nerves involved, so it's definitely a possibility.
I would not be shocked if this is the case for the entire season, that Fedotov does decide to go home if he's going to be relegated to this, because he can make similar money in the KHL
and he'll play every game and be the starter.
Yes, and he gets to go home, but we'll see. Because it's not a tradable contract at all.
No,
I don't think the Flyers would hate playing him in the AHL, but I don't know if he's willing to do that.
It might be. I think for the AHL thing, the Flyers wouldn't mind. I think it's more what he's comfortable doing at this point, right?
If he doesn't show up, though, they get to suspend him and terminate his contract. So
yeah, that's true.
I don't think they're going to want to do that to him. Yeah. Okay, that's it for this week. Again, a little bit lighter than our usual 2-hour episodes. We're trying to do that a little bit. We'll see if that continues. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I'm just going to continue to kind of add to that article series. A little change of plans. I was trying to do it, after every 5 games. With work and stuff gets a little hectic. So I did 1 article after 5, 1 after 12. We'll probably do more like another one at 17, maybe another one after 24. So instead of 20, we'll do 24 games and spread it out a little bit more. But just keep an eye out on Flyers Nitty Gritty for that type of stuff. Just continue to kind of assess the Flyers season, some observations that I've noticed about the team. Appreciate the support because we're getting a lot of views on our articles in general on the website. So thanks everybody for supporting us.
Yeah, great stuff, dude. Your articles are killing it. Love seeing it. All right. Again, thank you everybody for listening. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you made it this far, please hit the like button if you like what we do. Subscribe to the podcast if you can. Again, it's the best way to support us. Hit the notification bell to get notified of when we release these episodes. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. You can follow us there as well to get our latest episodes in the audio version, and also give us a review if you can. These are the best ways to support us. Just the likes, the subscriptions, the follows, the reviews. Please keep it coming. I know it's a little tougher to talk about the Flyers right now, but I have a feeling things will improve. And also shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to check out Jim Steaks. Also, Public Summit Adjusters. Go to them for all your insurance, consultation needs. They will help you deal with your insurance companies. Again, Summit Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And a last shout out to Sports Spider. They are the aggregator. They are our partners. Make sure to go to sportspider.com. You can go check. All of our stuff is pinned at the top. So make sure to go check out Sports Spider and support them as well. All right. Thank you, Vasili. You did great, as always. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We love you guys. And remember, always stay gritty.